mic's on. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Once again. Here you go. Oh, yeah. Woohoo!
Good morning, Timothy, and welcome to this 206th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One. Welcome to you and welcome to everybody else who is watching us now on LinkedIn and YouTube, probably also Facebook and listening to us in Clubhouse. It's a pleasure to have you with us all. So, Timothy, I'm not going to really talk too much before I give you the screen. So just saying that we are once again reporting from Tokyo, and Timothy is reporting from Katsuyama, I believe, and it is January the 19th, the day, wow, with a beautiful blue sky. Okay, so yes, it's over to you, Timothy.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, and welcome to January 19th, our 206th episode, Maya.
Oh,
I am
206, yes.
Yes, I am reporting from my shabby studio here in Katsuyama. I would be reporting from the good ship Grimm's, except we just don't have a good internet connection there, so I have to come over here, and with apologies. And thank you, Maya, for lighting a fire under me to get me going for today's briefing.
Well, you're very welcome, and apologies for that. Yes. Sometimes, I hit the send button and then it doesn't go through. So apologies for today. Eventually, we are here. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're on track again. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me get started with what's going on and what's happened in Japanese politics over this last week. The yen closed out at 156.28 on Friday. That's a little bit stronger than it ended over the last 4 or 5 weeks. This is as a consequence of a lot of things, not just the supplemental budget that was passed in December, but also maybe because the diet's been out of session and the economy is starting to show a little bit of signs of being improved. So there's a lot going on this week as a consequence of that, with regard to the yen, with the Bank of Japan meeting at the end of this week and that sort of thing. But let me get to some of the other things. The Trump presidency starts not our Monday is tomorrow, but Monday in the United States is 2 days away. So it's another 2 days before Trump assumes the presidency, and we can anticipate vast changes, not only in what's going on in the United States, and when the United States sneezes, Japan frequently catches a cold. So we're anticipating a lot of going on, a lot to be impacting Japan and foreign policy, that sort of thing as well. But something to look forward to, definitely a change in the tone in Washington, D.C. and with U.S. politics. Revelations of the kickback scandal that we've just suffered through over the last 8 or 10 months or so are being implicating the Tokyo metropolitan government as well. You might not know this, but the Tokyo metropolitan government has 127 seats. It's a unicameral legislature overseen by Governor Koike. It goes up for elections in July, just prior to the upper house elections. So the fact that these revelations, the LDP members within the Tokyo metropolitan government have also been receiving kickbacks, is a real punch to the gut for the prime minister. The ethics committee will question 14 upper house members starting tomorrow. They questioned 4 last week. These are upper house members who were implicated in the kickback scandal, and these revelations, not only with the accountant being arrested from Seiwakai, the Mr. Abe's former Prime Minister Abe's faction, but there's also, how these people received their instructions, how they received their money, how much money they received has already been reported. But this is really going to impact them running for re-election, for many that are running for re-election in the upcoming summer. Whether they're going to be in power or not, they're going to have a hard time winning their seats back. Primaries for the opposition parties, it's been unheard of in Japan so far, but it looks like they might be going through primaries. Primaries are where typically in a a political party, you have several contenders within your party who want to run for a certain seat. They have a primary. It's among the members, it's among the public, it's to some degree. And then the winner of that primary becomes the candidate to run against everybody else in what the seat would be. This is being considered by the opposition parties to run primaries among themselves to pick the best candidate for these election districts to run against the LDP. So in the past, the LDP has had an advantage because the opposition parties steal votes from each other, and the LDP, though it doesn't win a majority, wins the most number of votes and therefore takes the seat. So there's a lot going on there, a lot of horse trading, as we predicted would be happening after the diet, the supplemental budget and the extraordinary diet session ended in late December. But now on Friday of this week, the diet comes back into session. In the January 14th poll, Ishiba is holding firm in public support. So he's not going so much up, he's not going so much down. He's still not at a very comfortable position. The negative ratings for him is still at 47%. So he's still under the 30% threshold of approval ratings. That's a danger zone for prime ministers. The LDP is sitting a little bit better at 39%, probably because of the supplemental budget and just the fact that politics has been quiet these last couple of days. But the LDP is standing firm. The Constitutional Democratic Party has lost 0.6% support, and the Democratic Party for the People has lost 1.5%. These are still within the margin of error, so it's not that meaningful. Plus, this poll was taken by NHK. So there's other polls that came out. GG Press came out with a poll. I think the results were on Friday. They gave it a little bit better, a little bit more texture there. The LDP is standing at 13. The appreciation for the LDP is standing at 17.3%. The Constitutional Democratic Party at 5.1% approval. The Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki's group, is at 6.6% approval. Komeito is at 3.6% approval. Ishin is at 1.7% approval. Reiwa 1.4%. The Japan Communist Party at 0.5% approval. The Conservatives, Sanseito, and the Social Democratic Party are all at a 0.3% approval rating. These numbers tell you that the public is not really enamored very much with politics. They'll go to the polls if there's a poll, if it's forced upon them, if it's part of their duty and their obligation to go to a poll. But you can see that the appreciation of the general public for political parties and politicians is not very high, and that's a consequence of a lot of things, just traditionally in Japan, but also this very tumultuous year that we've had. Mr. Ishiba, the prime minister, has moved into the official residence. This residence was designed and built by Frank Lloyd Wright. You remember that, Maya? I don't think you've ever been inside, but it's a fabulous red brick building that sits right next to the prime minister's official office. So he and his wife moved in to take over, and I guess they're there for the long haul, very hopefully. Maybe not after we finish this briefing. But there's a lot of other stuff going on, and I would like to touch on that. But once again, Maya, you know that we don't have all the answers. I just report on what's going on to keep our audience up to date and up to speed. But it's really the question and answer and the contributions of other people who are in the audience, all the Japan hands that have joined us for these 4 years. We're coming up on a 4-year anniversary. We greatly appreciate that, and we encourage you to, join us in this conversation, in this discussion about Japanese politics, so that we're all enriched by it. But thank you very much for tuning in. Maya, turn it back to you, and then I'll get into the more beef and bones of Japanese politics.
Thank you, Timothy, and thank you to everybody who has been with us and helped us, get insights and also collect information even during the briefings, because as Timothy said, we do not know everything, and we sometimes rely on you helping us. Thank you very much for doing that and for continuing doing it. So, and Timothy, before we continue, of course, I want to say a big thank you to Kanchu, that is Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, our first sponsor. Kanchu is based in Yokohama, and the company offers bilingual services in the area of real estate. They do property management and investment property. If you want to connect with them, you can reach out to James Howell. He's on LinkedIn, very accessible, and he posts there quite often. But you also find details, contact details in the description of the video on YouTube. His email is james@kanchu.com. Please reach out and talk with them. So you can talk with them in English or Japanese. The choice is yours. And Timothy, now it is once again over to you. So let's continue with more details and news about the
Okay,
world of Japanese politics.
great. Thank you very much. And I'm just biting at the bit. There is so much going on. The diet starts on the 24th, which is Friday. What's going to happen is the emperor. Maya, can you turn off your mic, perhaps?
Sure.
There. No, I can't hear you strangling your cat. The emperor will come over from the palace where he resides just across the moat there. He'll open the diet on Friday. People will be in their best attire. It is not time for new members to join, although there might be, there are no new members that are joining this time. He'll open the diet on a Friday, and then they'll take the recess on Saturday and Sunday. And then things really begin in earnest on Monday. There's a lot building up here. There are a couple of things that are really coming down the path that we can look forward to that we'll be reporting on pretty frequently. The first is passing the budget. They must pass the budget for 2026 by March 31st. That's probably a gimme, but how we get there is really the story that we're going to be following. The prime minister lacks 11 votes in order to pass the budget. He must have a coalition with somebody else, with maybe 11 other members who are not LDP members, persuading them somehow to vote with the LDP so that they can pass the budget. More likely, he's going to be negotiating with the Constitutional Democratic Party, Isshin no Kai, or the Democratic Party for the People, to get those additional 11 votes so that they can pass the budget. More likely, the Constitutional Democratic Party is going to fight him tooth and nail. They've already said, we want to question all of these people who have been involved in the slush fund scandal. We want them to testify in the ethics committee. We want it to be open to the public. We want it to be sworn testimony. And if it's not, then we're not going to contribute. We're not going to participate in passing the budget. You're going to have egg all over your face, probably lose your prime ministership as a consequence of that. So these are our demands. Similarly, the Democratic Party for the People has their own wish list, as does Isshin no Kai. The other parties don't have beyond 11 members, so they're not really in the game. So he's limited to basically two parties: Isshin no Kai, which has 38 members, or the Democratic Party for the People, which has 28 members. I guess if I was to make a guess right now, it would probably be Isshin no Kai, because the expo in Osaka is starting in April, so the diet needs to be passed on March 31st. 14 days later, the expo begins, and I think that that's really an attractive option for trading with the prime minister. So we'll see, but there's going to be a lot going on between now and then. The accountant for the LDP in the LDP's Tokyo metropolitan government was arrested on Friday. This is a fellow who is supposed to count the money and authorize distributions, and also tell people how much tax they have to pay for monies that they've received as being a member of the assembly. Like I said, there's 127 members in the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly. The LDP has a majority of members there, and many of these members are going up for election in June this summer. And now with the arrest of the accountant and the display of how many people took the money, these LDP members, the other parties are just licking their chops, waiting for that opportunity to come in. The Democratic Party for the People swooped in and won, 250% more than they originally started with in the last election for the lower house. They want to repeat that, but also the other parties, the other opposition parties want to do the same thing. And with the LDP kind of bleeding in the water with these revelations, and more is going to come out. This is for the Tokyo metropolitan government, but also at the national level, you've got members of the upper house who did take money. They've admitted to that. They've said how much money they've received. The public prosecutors have said, okay, well, it's not over a threshold, so we're not going to arrest you, but the court of public opinion is going to judge you. Similarly, with these members of the Tokyo metropolitan government who have been taking these funds, the public prosecutor's office has said, we know who these fellows are, we know how much money they took, but they didn't cross a threshold of 300,000, no, it's Sunzen, 300,000, 30, no, I'm sorry, it's 30 million yen. It hasn't eclipsed a threshold of that over the last 2 or 3 years that we've calculated. This has been going on for more than, with the Tokyo metropolitan government, it probably started there. But at least 15, 20 years this has been going on. The public prosecutor's office is capping their calculations for 2 or 3 years. And because it didn't exceed 30 million yen that you pocketed and didn't pay taxes on, we're gonna let it go because it's not a threshold amount. The public opinion is going to be much harsher than that. And these people are being identified. They're going to, with the lower, with the upper house, they do have testimony requirements. Mr. Ishiba has said, and he was kind of not forced, but he, as a negotiation with the Constitutional Democratic Party, he said, if these people don't testify in the ethics committee, then we're not going to support them in the upper house elections. So they've got a gun to the head. The LDP has said, if you don't testify in the ethics committee, we're not going to support you in your election bid coming this summer. So we expect an awful lot to be going on. 72-year-old Hidekatsu Yajima is the accountant, 72 years old. He's been the accountant of record. He was arrested for not reporting 60 million yen, which is about 386,000 US dollars. That's not a very big amount of money, but of course, in this kind of graft and scandal, any amount of money is illegal. But I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to find that out. The time frame is 2019 to 2022, and that's the prosecutor's calculation frame. So they have said that there are 30 members who got party tickets, and typically what the scheme is, the LDP gives them 100 party tickets to sell for Benkyo Kai or Hagimasu Kai, these kind of study sessions, and they're required, their quota is to sell 100 of them, 50 of the 100, and anything above their quota, they get a stipend from, they get a kickback for, and that's how it works at the Tokyo local metropolitan government. But that's also similarly how it was run in the national election or the national party as well. So there's a lot of grief that's coming down the path, and we're going to continue to follow that. But the implications are heavy for the upcoming election. So as I said, passing the budget is obligation or goal number one for the prime minister and for the LDP. The second goal is that he's got to have some sort of a coalition, which kind of begets goal number one. He's got to have some sort of coalition with one opposition party to not just pass the budget, but also to smooth things through after the budget passes. You don't want to pass the budget and then have a fight on your hands afterwards. You've got to get some sort of a solid commitment there. If he's successful at that, then the prime minister has a chance of, staying prime minister until the upper house election and maybe even thereafter. And then the third thing that he needs to do is form a working relationship, a close bond with incoming President Trump and his administration. There is overtures there. There has been movement there. Mr. Iwaya, the foreign minister, has been invited to the inauguration. The prime minister won't make it, but the foreign minister will be there. It's somewhat rare for the foreign minister to go to the inauguration, but that's Japan's representation from the government that will be attending there. Moving on to the Bank of Japan and the economy here, the Bank of Japan has their every month at the end of the month, they have a 2-day session. So you'll be hearing a lot of this. It's on Thursday and Friday. The diet opens up on Friday, remember. So anything that they have to say, it's going to have an implication into what's going on in the diet. And remember, the diet's not going to get anything done on Friday. The emperor comes in and opens the diet. The prime minister might make something like a State of the Union address. We don't know now. But President Trump takes office Tokyo Tuesday, and the Bank of Japan makes their announcements on Thursday and Friday. And things are moving somewhat consistently. It looks like there might be a rate hike for lending from the Bank of Japan, but everything depends on what happens when Mr. Trump becomes president. He's got several executive orders that are teed up and ready to be implemented. Not everybody knows what the full scope is, so people are waiting with great trepidation. Are there going to be tariffs? Is he going to be kindly inclined towards dealing with Japan? That sort of thing. So the Bank of Japan will meet on the 24th after 2 days. Governor Kazuo Ueda is likely to up the interest rate. And this is because the cost of living has elevated. Even though people's salaries are rising, the cost of living is rising faster. But there has been a gradual economic recovery. So it's a very delicate balance. The yen, as we reported, has strengthened a little bit over the last week to increase borrowing costs, to not burden the economy too much, but they've got to keep that inflation rate towards their 2% target, and they haven't hit it in 30 months, but they're trying to hit that recovery. And there is an anticipation of the spring wage offensive. So that happens every spring. I think most people are familiar with the spring wage offensive. It's a feature of the Japanese labor economy. Every spring, the labor unions come together. They negotiate with management for wage increases, and it's likely that this is going to come up in April and May this year, and probably wages will be increased again. So it's going to have an impact on the economy. But if inflation is still at the clip it's growing, it could, not even make a dent in the overall economy, and people are spending less. And the amount of consumption that Japanese people generate is more than 50% of the entire economy. There are the industry and things like that produce money for GDP calculation, but it's consumption, and it's the people who are buying things and living their lives. That's where the majority of the Japanese economy is. So when people are spending less, the GDP goes lower, and also it impacts the yen-dollar ratio. And it's not always, but it's predominantly based on the value of the U.S. dollar to the yen, and that's why we report on it. And so a lot of anticipation and expectation for Mr. Ueda's briefing on Thursday and Friday of this week. The defense minister, Nakatani Gen, I've known him for many, many years. He's currently the defense minister. He was visiting the UK for 3 days this last week, predominantly talking about the advanced 6th generation fighter project that Japan, the UK, and Italy are on track for. So they've made agreements there. The first, I don't know if it would be called a CEO or the leader of that 3-country coalition for building these fighters will be a Japanese, but the headquarters will be based in England. And the headquarters was decided. It's going to be in, let me see, Reading, is it? It's going to be in Reading. Where did I write that down? In the British town of Reading. That will be where the headquarters is likely to be. So he visited the headquarters there and had meetings with his counterpart. The rollout is for 2035 for these advanced jets. They're going to replace the self-defense forces F-2 jets and the British and Italy Eurofighter. So this is a very big deal, very expensive. They're not quite sure they can actually fund it all. They're thinking of inviting other countries to participate, Saudi Arabia being the most likely suitor that they're pursuing. But this falls on the heels of a lot of other things that are going on between Japan and Britain, and that's why Secretary Nakatani was in England. And on Friday, I think it's on Friday. No, it's already started. More than 100 British troops, actually like special forces troops, landed in Japan for exercises with the self-defense forces. And this is pretty interesting because the 16 Air Assault Brigade will be training with the ground self-defense forces, 12th Brigade and the 1st Airborne Division. Did you know that they had an airborne division called the 1st Airborne Division in Japan? So these guys are training not just with the British, but with the Australians, and of course always with the Americans too. But there is an exercise, Vigilant Isles exercise. It's probably a 4-year plan, and this is the first of these exercises where the British troops are training with self-defense forces on Japanese soil. So this is a pretty big deal. They'll be training until January 26th. So it's possible, if you're out in drinking establishments, to run into some big burly British soldiers going out for a drink or experiencing some of Tokyo before they go back to England. But it just never stops. You know, the NATO mission has also made some movements. In the embassy in Brussels, they had a dual role for the Japanese ambassador. He was in charge of the NATO mission for Japan, as well as being the ambassador. They've decided to split that, not only split it to assign another ambassador to take charge of that, but also to move it out of the embassy. So this is interesting because, as we all know, Japan is very, very desirous to join the Five Eyes, the intelligence sharing association between 5 allied countries. Japan is not a member of that. It's a participating member to some degree, but it's not Six Eyes. They want to be a part of that, and the reason why they're not is because of the lack of security and perhaps the lackadaisical, compared to some of the other countries, lackadaisical security protocols that they have for cybersecurity and for intelligence gathering, that sort of thing. So the fact that, if you can't fix it, maybe you start anew and you start from the ground up. It kind of has a feel like that. So the NATO office for the Japanese will be a separate entity and headed by a new Japanese ambassador, Osamu Izawa, but the current ambassador, Masahiro Mikami, is staying put, and he'll continue to be ambassador in Brussels. So that's a kind of a new movement there, and it's somewhat indicative of other things that's going on. When we're talking about Japan and defense and how it's doing in the rest of the world and their intelligence gathering, and perhaps maybe other countries not evaluating them highly enough for security purposes, it is instructive that Tokyo Governor Koike has decided to spend 100 million yen this year in 2025 for a program that's going to start in earnest in 2026 to send Japanese students in Tokyo on foreign missions. So Japanese students who are in university, if they want to travel overseas on short-term or long-term assignments to pursue a university study or just a study abroad, they can get money from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. This is astounding, that the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, if you have a child in Tokyo, you're paying Tokyo taxes, you can apply for and get money from the Tokyo government to send your child overseas. This doesn't apply to foreigners, even if you're married to a Japanese national and you pay taxes. It doesn't apply to those kids, but for Japanese nationals who live in Tokyo, there are two programs. There's a short-term program that they will select 500 students in the first year for short-term stays, which is 4 weeks to 3 months, something like a homestay or travel abroad. And the long term is 100 students a year for maybe what is it, 6 months to a year for that, and they get 3.15 million yen per year, plus a 150,000 yen a month stipend to pursue their studies. This is, I think, an attempt by the Tokyo governor to increase the amount of international awareness by sending children abroad. And for those people who have been listening to our program for so long, you know that the number of students that are traveling overseas has decreased, even as the number of foreign students to Japan has increased. So Japan is at a deficit there. They're spending a lot of money on Japanese universities. I think a lot of people in our audience have actually spent time in Japanese universities. It's not like spending time in a university in England or Australia or the United States, which is comparatively like a holiday. But they are upping that and increasing the amount of funding from the national government and from the local government. I think Tohoku University received an enormous amount of money, $100 million to increase their research and funding. But it is interesting that the Tokyo governor is notifying and doing something to increase the amount of appreciation and the amount of foreign interaction among Japanese students. It looks like there is a birth of a new party in Japan. You remember the Tokyo governor race just last year. Koike won, as we predicted. There were more than 50 members of 50 candidates who joined this election. And the person who came in number 2 has decided that he's going to start another party, which is somewhat rare. At the national level, there are about 7 political parties. 2 of them are very young, very small, but we can see the birth of a new party now. You might remember that Shinji Ishimaru came in second place, a surprise. He was a mayor of a local city in Hiroshima Prefecture, and he decided that he was going to run for Tokyo governor as well. He was way from out of left field as a candidate. He established a residency in Tokyo. Not many people knew of him, but he used social media very adroitly and just really came up strong. And as a consequence of that, other parties are beginning to look at social media a little bit more intently now. And I think it's changed the landscape of Japanese elections and Japanese campaigning. But this is the fellow who started it. And he's decided he's going to start a new party, but he's set his sights a little bit, not at the national level, but the Tokyo level. So he announced on, I think it was Friday, he had a press announcement that went for almost 3 hours. And he wants to take Tokyo seats, which I think are going to be very much open for grabs, especially since the LDP is going to have lots of questions to voters about their handling of slush funds and the money that they've received for presumably years, but at least the public prosecutors say for the last 3 years. So I think it's going to be a kind of a gold rush for opposition parties to come in and move into those positions that are going to be vacated by the LDP. It's just a prediction here. But this former mayor is going to start his new party. It's called Saisei no Michi, and that's the path to rebirth. That's the name of the party. And he's going to hit the 42 constituencies in Tokyo and vie for one of the, or several of the 127 seats in the Tokyo metropolitan government. So we're looking forward to seeing how that goes. And I think he'll probably do well enough to make a bid for the upper house election, perhaps having some candidates there. He hasn't announced that yet. but maybe hold tight, win some Tokyo metropolitan government seats, and then go national in the next lower house election. We have to wait for 3 more years for 50% of the upper house to run for election again. But moving on, Maya, the numbers are in for 2024 for the tourisms. There were 37 million visitors in 2024. We report on this all the time because it's such a vital part of the economy, and also for Japan's branding and also its outreach to the larger world. But the weaker yen and revenge tourism, and also China establishing a couple of direct flights, really impacted this. The previous record was set in 2019, just before COVID hit. It was 33.4 million in 2019, and then you remember 2019 COVID hit in the late part of the year, so you can't really count at least December, but part of November as well in those numbers. So this number now, 37 million, is up 15.6% from that number. But also in December alone, there were 3.5 million visitors. That's a record. And the number of visitors by country, South Korea, China, are first place and second place. In fact, let me see, China, the visitors from China were twice what they were in 2023. So you might remember there's been a lot of controversy between Japan and China, especially about the tainted water that's being released in Fukushima, and the closing of importing food and fish from Japan. Blanket rejection by China is starting to be relaxed, but at least the trade in tourism is increasing. So for the Chinese, there were 7 million people that came, but this is 27% less than it was in 2019. So there's a lot more growth that can be had there. So 37 is a record year, but it looks like, at least from China, and China is one of the main participants of sending visitors here, the grand total impact for the economy here was 8.1 trillion yen in 2024. That's $51 billion that tourists come in and spend. That's up 53.1% versus 2023, 53% higher than it was last in 2023. But it's up 69%, almost 70% more money was spent in 2024 than it was in 2019. So there's something really important that's going on here. Among the amount of money that was spent by country, China is by far, they spend more money. Apparently, the Americans spend more money on lodging. The Chinese spend more money on purchasing goods, as you can kind of figure out. But of the grand total, China is spent 21% of the grand total, for a total of 1.73 trillion yen. Second place was the Chinese spent 1.7 trillion. The second place was 1.09 trillion, so quite a bit lower. That came from Taiwan. So the Taiwanese, although in numbers they're not number 2, but in terms of how much they're spending, they are number 2. South Korea was number 3 at 693 billion. The US came in at 4th at 900 billion yen, and Hong Kong came in at 658. So it's a really steep decline from first place to second place, and then third place, and then they're pretty much packed in there. But among these 5 countries, that's 65% of the grand total of 8.1 trillion yen that was injected into the economy by tourism. It turns out that the UK visitors spent the most per person. That's about 380,000 yen. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but I guess it's for 3 days or 4 days. They spent 380,000 yen per person, and Australia came in second at 382,000 yen per person. Japanese travelers, on the other hand, going outside of Japan, was 13 million. That's compared to 37 million visitors coming in. 13 million Japanese went overseas. That's a 35% increase from the year previous. but it's 35% less than it was in 2019. So 2019, we had COVID. The number of people who have, Japanese people who have gone overseas is far greater than it was even in 2019. So it's something that's huge that is going on. Kind of, it's not that it's unnoticed. If you're in Tokyo, you notice it all the time, and it's making a big impact. Kyoto is other Japanese people are squeezed out because the prices and the fees need to increase, and the number of visitors. Everybody, when they come to Japan, it's like a mecca. You need to visit. I mean, if you're going to Tokyo, you've got to go to Kyoto too, in one of your visits. So it happens pretty frequently. So there's a lot going on there. I want to wrap it up now, Maya. I've been going on quite a bit, but let's hit the Q&A and get the real fire of this briefing going. And once again, I thank everybody for joining us on this weekly update. It is important, I think, to keep on top of things, but also to help you predict what's going to be happening next. Thank you for being a part of the audience.
Well, and thank you, Timothy, for delivering the information. And I'm actually very grateful for you coming up with the numbers about inbound travel, because it also tells me that there is some development there. I mean, we have been talking quite a lot here about, the government and local governments offering more services on spot so that the spending per customer, per visitor would increase. And I can see that there is a positive trend there, even though I'm absolutely sure that there is a lot more that can be done, and that will be done on the way down the road. All right, and now, before we continue with the questions that have come before and during the briefing, I want to say, to give recognition to our other sponsor, Houze, that is Houze Inc., as they are known online and among their customers in Tokyo and Yokohama. So once again, Houze offers bilingual services in custom home design, construction and renovations. They also do commercial building construction. If you want to work with them to benefit from their services, please connect with Hana Urushizawa Howell. She is on LinkedIn, or you could also reach out to her via email at hana@kanachu.com. She represents our two sponsors, the two companies, Kanchu and Houze. So thanks a lot to both of them. It's our pleasure to represent you here, to introduce you to our audiences. And with this, Timothy, we are going now to look into the questions that we have received this morning. I hope that you're ready for them, because we have several. Oh, yeah, I can see that. All right. So, but please hold on, okay? So
Okay.
let me go to the first one. As always, Byron, thank you very much for coming up before everybody else with the questions that you have, and for letting us know that you're very much into Japanese politics. So, Timothy, are you ready to listen?
I am. Thank you for lining up the tormentors, the questioners.
Okay. All right, here we go. So Byron writes, there are persistent media reports that PM Ishiba may have threatened to dissolve the lower house after the approval of the budget of March 2025 and trigger a double lower house, upper house election in July 2025. Okay, the first question comes, are those empty threats, given that the LDP may come out with even lower numbers after such election?
Sure.
So, yes?
So
What
can we
are-
respond to that one, or do you want to hit me with the second one?
No, we have another one which is about PM Ishiba, but then I think that we'll go with the second one
Okay.
after we answer the
Okay.
first.
Thanks for the question. Yes, he made that kind of veiled threat. If you don't cooperate, if we don't pass the budget because you're holding your feet and you're continuing to torture me because I'm in a minority position and you're just doing this to damage me, then I'm going to close down the house. Yeah, it sounds nice, but it's logistically it doesn't make sense. If he closes down the house, he's got 4 months between the time that the budget must pass and the elections. So if he's going to take his ball and go home, he's not going to close down the House after the budget is not passed. I mean, the budget will be passed. It's got to pass. If he's so mad that he's going to close down the House, then that means he's going to close down the House in June, because it doesn't make sense. You can't accelerate the upper house election. The upper house election is set by law, by the Constitution. It has to happen in before July 28th. So that means that since it's I think it's a 20-day election cycle, he has to announce it and then launch it. And with the diet ending on June 20th, he's got maybe 28 or 30 days before the election has to happen. And within that, there's 20 days of campaigning. So the end result is July 28th. They must have been an election by that date. So if he wants to have a double election, which I think is appealing for both people, if you hate the LDP, the double election has great appeal, because you think that maybe the opposition parties can finally get their act together and form a coalition to challenge the LDP. But if you're an LDP person and you want the LDP to reassert itself, in the poll that I just reported, not the NHK one, but the GG Press one, the more recent one, more than 20% of the people said, let's stick with Mr. Ishiba as prime minister, whatever the circumstances are, because there's nobody else that can do what he's doing, right? It's the common refrain that just stay with the person that's doing whatever they're doing, because nobody else can do what they do. But that's just 21%. So I think if you want the LDP to succeed in governing the country and reasserting more than 50% of the lower house and the upper house, and reestablish their primacy as the governing body, a double election also makes sense. If he's not, his teeth aren't knocked out and he has a black eye as a consequence of passing the budget, which is a likely scenario.
All right, thank you for that. We continue with the next question. Can Prime Minister Ishiba overrule the LDP's aging leadership, such as Secretary General Moriyama, who may in fact lose their seats in that second election within 12 months of the first one in October 2024?
I'm not sure I grasp the whole question. The prime minister does have the right to close down the House. I think the question is, he's supported by several bigwigs, not just Mr. Suga, but also Mr. Kishida and Mr. Moriyama. Mr. Moriyama's power is increasing. Remember, there were 13 members shy of the majority, and they received 2 more members. 2 independents joined the LDP last week. Those are from the Moriyama camp. Moriyama brought them in. So his power is rather stable and increasing. He is the one that the prime minister sent to China to talk with the Chinese leaders. Please release the ban you have on Japanese foodstuffs. Let's be friendly. Let's open trade. Let's be, let's have a state visit. We haven't had the state visit. And we're primed for that, and it would be a good opportunity. And we haven't met President-elect Trump. We're not expected to meet President-elect Trump or the President Trump until sometime in mid-February. So wouldn't this be nice to meet with the premier or have a state visit? I think it's too early to do that, but yeah, they're playing both sides there, and Mr. Moriyama is leading that, so you can't discount him. I think if I have to answer the question point blank, I don't think Mr. Ishiba can make any decision on his own and say, I'm going to close down the House, or I'm going to refuse to listen to all of my supporters, because he doesn't have that power of personality. He doesn't have that level of support. He's prime minister because of these guys. So I think it would be difficult for him to do that.
All right, thank you for that insight as well. And the next question is all of this a reflection of continued infighting within the LDP between the previously dominant Abe faction members and several others, such as former Prime Minister Kishida's Koichikai faction members?
Yeah. So nobody's talking too much about the Seiwakai. The Seiwakai is bleeding. It's somewhat leaderless, and even those people who are leaders or who aspire to be leaders are worried that they might be implicated in the fund scandal. Somebody countermanded what Mr. Abe said. Let's not do this anymore. Let's stop this skimming of the funds and distributing. Let's stop that. And it stopped until he was assassinated, and then it started up again. And everybody wants to know who decided that. And I suspect it wasn't just one person. I have a couple of people in mind, and it was probably a coalition. They all loved having that extra fund. They loved the power that it generated for their political faction. Seiwakai was by far the biggest. It was twice as big as the next biggest faction. So that was done. The glue that held these people together was, you can make money and you can distribute the funds that you have by enhancing your position among your constituents, thereby guaranteeing your election when the election comes up again. Or you can just have a nicer car and better suits. But it was an attractive distraction. And I think for people to be in the Seiwakai faction, it just doesn't look very good. And as more revelations come out of the funding and the accountant being interrogated and people in the upper house who took the money having to report to the ethics committee. And don't forget, the budget committee is headed by a constitutional Democratic Party member. It's the first time in 30 years that the budget committee chairman is not an LDP person. And the reason why that's significant is because the power of the chairman of the budget committee, different from all other committees, is he has the power to tell the prime minister to appear for questioning. No other committee has that authority. And you can expect that the Constitutional Democratic Party chairman will be questioning Mr. Ishiba, and it's going to be a spectacular display. And so it's going to be a very rough period up until the passage of the budget, and then after the budget, it's going to be even more tumultuous.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to make 2 points actually, and to what you just said now is we know that basically there wouldn't have been a problem with the slush fund scandal if the politicians had paid taxes on the money, the funds they received. I believe that basically that's what undid, the whole thing. And what enraged the public, because the general public pays taxes, and at the same time the politicians did not, and they kept it quiet. And well, why should they?
Clearly illegal.
Illegal, yes. And then the other point is that Timothy, you mentioned that the Abe faction is bleeding, and it has actually diminished in ranks. I mean that the numbers, the number of members has decreased, and so on. People do not want to be associated with it. But we also know that human nature actually compels people to congregate in groups.
Yep.
Right. And most of the time, those groups are not. They are not formal. And we have seen some trends and tendencies among Diet members to once again stick together, right? So I believe that they're not going to call these groups factions anymore because of what happened with the slush fund scandal and everything. But still, there are tendencies there. And probably those groups, they will continue holding power, right, over committees and over also policy making as well.
Right. Can I respond to that if you don't mind?
Please do, yes.
So my good friend Dan Harada, he runs Nagata Cho Forum. He does the breakfast briefings once a month. We frequently do dual presentations. He's produced an accounting of, in the LDP, he's an LDP member, as you know, the LDP, who is on first base, who's on second base, and he produces this upcoming, and he keeps it rather current. Let me give you the ranking as it stands right now, okay? So this is instructive to the question that was posed. The ASO faction stands at 45 members. It used to be that the Seiwakai had 100 members, and the number one faction, and it still exists as a faction, it didn't disband. The Aso faction is at 45 members. The number two is the Motegi faction. It did disband, but among people who say they stay consistent, they stay collected together, is also 45, same number as the Aso faction. Seiwakai is in at number 3. It has 38 members, but it doesn't have a leader. It's not called the Aso faction or the Motegi faction. It's just a vacant. It's called Seiwakai, and it is an association. It's not a faction anymore. The fourth largest is the Kishida faction. That has 38 members, the same number as the Seiwakai. The Nikai faction has 25 members, and the Moriyama faction has 9 members. They just increased by 2 because the LDP increased two more members there. So the grand total for the LDP is 305. They need 316 to eclipse the 51%. So that's where we are right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the numbers. And I continue with the next question. Okay. Isn't it more likely that LDP will compel Prime Minister Ishiba to retire and bring instead Mr. Hayashi, or indeed Mr. Kishida, to continue the remaining 3 years of the current term of the House of Representatives?
Who's this question from?
From Byron.
Okay. Yep. Spot on.
Spot on. All right. And another question on the list. Would the combined opposition prefer a double election in July 2025 rather than a new prime minister such as LDP's Hayashi?
It depends on everything. Yeah. I think if I was an opposition party member, I would aspire to a double election. It gives us a chance. But the LDP is not going to be toppled unless the opposition parties can form some sort of a understanding or a union, which is very difficult, but it is possible. The carrot is that we can kick out the LDP, and finally, in a coalition, you take finance, I'll take foreign policy, you take a Secretary of State, whatever. It would be pretty hard to cobble a government together and pass a budget. It happened before, and the opposition parties that came in, they just don't know how to run a government. It's too, they have no experience doing it. So they might be able to do that, but I think, yeah, it's hard to say.
Well, yeah, it is indeed. And I still think that it's, well, it seems that the opposition party leaders are focused on preserving their seats in the parliament as they stand at the moment, that those numbers, rather than forming coalitions with other opposition parties so that they can actually, yes.
Okay, but the fat lady hasn't sung yet, right, Maya? So they are talking about running primaries, which is something new. So of the opposition parties, let's have a primary. Let's let the voters decide. Is the candidate from the Democratic Party for the People the better candidate? And so the Ishin no Kai candidate and the Constitutional Democratic Party candidate steps back, and then they focus their efforts in some other election district. It makes a lot of sense. It would really excite politics in Japan. I just don't know if people have the tolerance for it. I mean, even in our show, we talk about Japanese politics. It's not everybody's cup of tea. If it's your cup of tea, you're really interested in it. You don't mind me getting into the weeds, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. And I think the Japanese population also has a threshold beyond which they're really not that interested in Japanese politics.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, definitely. But at the same time, I can see how strategic that move will be, right? If it is approved. But what does it take for that, for the primaries to be instated, let's say, first approved and then, so that basically they start being held? So they need a new legislation for that as well, right?
They don't need legislation for
No,
that.
they
No.
don't? Okay.
No, these are private parties. acting on their own volition. I think the key is how the prime minister does between now and passing the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Who he gets in bed with, what kind of trade-offs he makes. Is it long-term or short-term? Is it just until we pass the budget? And then after that, it's like the Constitutional Democratic Party. They said when they passed the supplemental budget, Mr. Prime Minister, we will cooperate with you so that you can pass the supplemental budget. But it's only to pass the supplemental budget. We'll go case by case moving forward, but we're not going to join you in a coalition. We're not going to accept a minister's position and become like a Komeito, a bound party. We'll just do it case by case, which is the worst situation for the LDP. They don't have anything to guarantee or to rely on.
Yes, that I agree with you on that. And at the same time, if I may make one more point, is that the opposition parties, they do not want to coalesce with the LDP, but they do not want to form a coalition among themselves either. And it's interesting to me to observe, I may be wrong here, but it seems that basically the smaller opposition parties like Ishin and the Democratic Party for the People get more media attention now than the Constitutional Democratic Party, which is an interesting development because we expected, right? We expected Mr. Noda to lead the CDP to, let's say, greater heights. Maybe after the prime minister's election. And that hasn't happened. He, being such a great politician, everybody was fearing him. And still, we've got two smaller parties just stealing the limelight from the CDP.
My assessment of that, Maya, it's a great observation. My assessment of that is like Mr. Kishida, he's just biding his time. He hasn't come out in full force yet. He's going to at some point in time. He's far more powerful than both the Ishin no Kai and the Democratic Party for the People combined, the Constitutional Democratic Party. So I think he's just being clever. He is a master statesman. He is not somebody you should underestimate. And I think he's just biding his time. Similarly, Mr. Kishida is doing the same. And I think you haven't heard or seen Mr. Kishida. He hasn't been in the public eye very much. I think he's just waiting for the prime opportunity. I like Hayashi as a prime minister. I think at some point in time he will become prime minister. I just don't know if it's his turn. I think probably Mr. Kishida has a little bit of a leg up. And Mr. Hayashi is in the Aso faction, as you know. I'm sorry, in the Kishida faction. So it's yeah, if somebody's going to go up, it's probably going to be the boss and not the number two, right?
All right. Well, great. Thank you very much for this. So it seems that we'll have to be watching out for what Mr. Kishida and what Mr. Noda do, and probably
unfortunately, you have to continue watching this program.
Right. Yes. Unfortunately or fortunately, we don't know that, but yes. No, I always tell people who I meet why actually politics, even though it may sound boring, it's actually important for businesses here in Japan, because through politics, these tendencies and the trends here, they shape the business environment in this country as well. And it is important that we keep informed about that so that we can anticipate changes in policy as well. Of course, people say that in Japan, and we have seen that in Japan, policy does not change drastically as it does in other countries, but even small changes here, they have big impact on businesses. So that's why to you, everybody who is watching us, please continue watching, and please, yes, continue thinking about politics as part of a very important part and factor of the business environment here in Japan. And if you have any projects in mind, if you need resolution of issues like government permits and also, let's say, market entry here in Japan, you know who to call. That's Timothy Langley sitting right in front of you here on the screen. Yes. Okay, so Timothy, it looks like you will be ready to go. You will be released from duty.
Wow.
in about 2 minutes or so. And yes, thank you very much for preparing this information. Yes.
Yes, what I wanted to say, since we're beginning to wrap it up, there are not that many questions today, actually.
No, well, we had about 7 questions or 8 questions,
Okay,
which is not
that's
that
great.
many. Yes,
No,
not that
no,
many, but still.
no, I appreciate it because it's Sunday and I've got a whole list of things that I'm supposed to do today. So once the briefing's finished, I'm back on the good ship Grimm's, and I'm looking forward to the time when the briefing studio moves from the back seat of my shabby jalopy into the interior of the good ship Grimm's. That'll be nice and warm and more comfortable. But I think it's probably a couple of months away until I finish everything. But what I would like to ask the audience is just to take the time to share this briefing with somebody else. Sometimes hitting like it really encourages us. Please take it a step further and share the content, or share when you're attending to somebody else, so that we can begin to expand our audience. Everybody needs to know about what's going on in Japanese politics. Like Maya said, as a part of your journey in becoming familiar with what's going on in the economy, with statehood, with diplomacy, Japanese politics is an essential component of that, and it's not available elsewhere. So we're dedicated to doing this. We've been doing it for almost 4 years, and what, Maya, maybe 3 more episodes. It's been 4 full years.
Yes, it will be. Yes. So
Please hit share, find some of your colleagues to share this with, and continue to keep this conversation going, because I think it's vital in understanding Japan and predicting what's going to be happening at the business level as well. And thank you,
well,
Maya, for coming up with this torturous idea of briefing everybody every Sunday morning.
well, I have to say thank you very much for your consistency and not running away every Sunday morning. I know that, well, it's easier to run away when you're on the other side of the Tokyo Bay, and you haven't done that, so thanks a lot for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And once again, to everybody who watched us or is going to watch us later today or during the week, well, it's our pleasure to be with you, and give us an indication that you have been with us. Hit like, subscribe also to the channel, because you can also receive notifications if you hit the bell button on YouTube, or whenever the update comes on LinkedIn, please hit attend so that you receive a notification before the live stream starts. And well, with that, we wish you a very pleasant Sunday, and also a bright new week. All the best, and please stay with us Wednesday morning. Oh, and Friday, this coming Friday, we're actually launching our podcast, Showtime at Japan Expert Insights, where we are going to talk about the entertainment industry here in Japan with Michael William Foster. So remember that, and please watch it if you're interested in entertainment in Japan. That's all for the moment, and now a word of thanks to our sponsors again, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku or Kanchu.com, with James at Kanchu.com, and Houze Inc. with Hana Urushizawa Howell. You can find them online, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube as well. Thanks a lot to both. Have a great day.
Thanks, Maya. Woohoo!